Hi, David Chapman. Hey, I'm back to talk about Chapter 2. Want to have just a couple of things to say very briefly about Chapter 2 as you go through that particular chapter in property management. The title of the chapter is Economics and Planning. I particularly like this chapter because it talks about this business cycle. And I think the business cycle, if you can get out of the university and understand the business cycle, it'll help you in whatever business you're in, particularly if you want to be an entrepreneur, because this is very important when you start to study life cycles of people, life cycles of businesses, and life cycles of the economy. They all tend to follow this same curve. And the book does a great job of explaining the different parts of the curve. Um, of the curve. The first thing in the business that we talk about prior to that is we talk about the business economy in general. And we talk about different types of variations. We have a seasonal variation that we see in the economy, whether it's due to weather and how it relates to construction. We can't pour concrete, typically can't pour concrete below freezing. Or we have to do additives, and we have to be very careful in those environments. So that has a big impact on our construction cycles. We try to get things framed in prior to winter so that we can work on the inside during the winter months. Secondly, one of the things we look for is during the school year. This is a property manager seasonal variation that they can plan for. We know, particularly around universities, that the students are going to come back and that in that August to September timeframe, and that we're going to start seeing them show up, and rentals are going to increase at that time. So what we want to try to do in property management to plan for that is to have our lease cycles come up during the time period when we know that those students are going to return. So that's just a response to a seasonal variation that you might see. Seasonal variations also with retirees. We know that a lot of retirees head south. They go to places in Texas, Arizona, and Florida. So we have this movement of this population during that time that we can't ignore. Likewise, during the summer months, we may see these same people move north. They may go to Colorado or places like that are cooler in the summer, and then in the wintertime we see them going to places like Texas, Arizona, and Florida. They're very predictable. The seasonal variations, we can make adjustments. So it hampers us a lot differently than those types of variations that we cannot predict. And we'll talk about those, or you'll read about those later. Briefly, I want to say something about the business cycle. In the book, it talks about this business cycle having different aspects. The first one, as you start out the business cycle, you have expansion. In a business, whether you're starting out a new business or if you look at the economy, it looks a lot the same way. That curve going up. You're on the expansion phase, and the book very clearly talks about different aspects of the economy and things that happen during that expansion cycle. So I'd encourage you to look at those and know what happens to hiring, know what happens to the dollar, to things like that that happen during that expansion. So we have that expansion part, and then likely we will crest. It'll top out, and then we'll get into something called recession, which most of you are familiar with. We've been in recession for some time to some degree. So most of you are familiar with that. The book details and outlines what happens to the price of things, the availability of things, jobs, and things like that during that recession cycle. So I want you to take a look at that, particularly in that module on recession. After that, we'll go into a contraction phase. Likewise, I want you to take a look and see what happens during the different aspects of that contraction. Then, theoretically, we're going to have a revival, which will come out of the contraction, and we start this cycle all over again. Again, going into an expansion phase after that. Now, I have a personal bias that I think that there's another piece of this called the lull. And that lull, I believe, happens with different maybe non-market things that happen, maybe government inputs. What happens whenever we lower the interest rates, or we do things to try to improve. So it doesn't improve it enough to put us into an expansion phase, but it gets us out of the recession phase or the contraction phase back into the recession phase. So it's kind of this just this area of lull. So we're kind of between. It's just a time period during the middle. The book actually addresses this time period as well, so I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Long-term movements. The book goes into this, talking about long-term movements of things that are happening in the economy. Those are important changes that we should look at. The most important one, and the one I want to talk about right now, is the demographic change that's going on in the United States, and that is the aging population. I'm 51 years old, so I am just the last of the baby boomers to come out. There's a lot of people before me that would be considered the actual baby boomers. That is a huge amount of people in the marketplace, frankly, with a lot of disposable income that has a really big impact on real estate. They also have needs as they age. They're going to be looking for a different type of real estate product. I would encourage you as property managers and real estate investors to look to see what these people, just a little bit older than I am, are looking for in that product, because that's going to be a huge force going forward. And I think I would really watch that movement. Another one that I think is worth looking at is immigration. What that group of people are going to be looking for in housing and other types of real estate needs. So those are long-term movements that you would want to look at. Technology falls into that. Internet falls into that. All types of different things fall into those long-term movements, as opposed to the next one I'll talk about, and that is random things that happen. Things like labor strikes, hurricanes, earthquakes, law changes, and things like that that happen randomly that are very difficult to react to, but we need to watch for those and react quickly to those occurrences. So in Chapter 2 then, we move on and we start talking about preparing a plan, a proposal, and those types of things that take into consideration the neighborhood, and then a little bit broader than just or actually start off with the property. Then we go to the neighborhood. From the neighborhood we go to the city. From the city we go to the region. From the region we go to the state, and from the state we go to the nation. So you put together these plans if you're going to manage property for somebody, or if you're just doing a strategic plan for a particular property or project. You'll want to consider that. You can either start off at the state or the national and go down smaller and go down to the property itself. But the book in this module will talk about and tell you along the way what you should do in preparation for describing that property or describing that neighborhood, and where to get the data that you do to put together these reports. So that's going to be a part of Chapter 2 as well. Well, I'm going to leave Chapter 2 there right now, and I'll let you explore that in the module itself. Thank you very much.